Mr. Finley here. So this week we're going to be diving into improvisation. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about the very basics of improv before we get up on our feet actually playing around. A lot of us are familiar with improvisation. We've seen shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway? We may have gone to see one of the improv teams here in town, like Transactors in Chapel Hill or Comedy Works. And they're usually pretty fun. So we often think, oh, I want to do that, I want to get involved in improv, or I want to watch people doing improv, because it looks like a lot of fun, and it is. But there's a few things to realize. First of all, you don't need to be nervous. Oftentimes when we see people doing improv, we think, oh, they must be so smart. They must be so naturally funny in order to do that. But it turns out that to do improvisation, you do not have to be clever or naturally dramatic, like I am, or particularly funny, like I'm not, or even smart at all. None of these things are necessary to do improv. In fact, it turns out that if you're any of these things, it actually gets in the way of you doing good improv. Because if you are naturally clever or dramatic or funny or smart, when you get up there into an improvisational scene, your brain is saying, oh, I've got to be clever. Oh, I've got to be dramatic. Oh, I've got to be funny. And your brain starts thinking of what you need to do and starts trying really hard, and it makes you freeze up. The worst improvers, is that a word? Improvisers, that works. The worst improvisers are those who get up there who have already figured out in their head what clever thing they're going to do. Because they do that, and it might get a laugh, or it might not work so well, and it doesn't get a laugh, and then that's it. They spend all their time working on how they could be funny or clever, and it ruins improv. And this is why a lot of people, when they first start doing improv, they realize, oh, it's harder than it looks, because if you try and be clever or dramatic or funny, it will ruin you. But it turns out it's much simpler than that. There's a very simple trick to make fantastically funny or interesting or moving improv, and it means getting away from all of these things. And the trick to doing great improv is to focus on your partner. Put your focus on the other person on stage with you. Don't get up there and think, what can I do to be funny? What can I do to be clever? Instead, when you go up on stage, put all of your focus on the other person up there. Focus on them entirely and think, what is that person doing? And if I were in real life, how would I respond to that person doing that? It turns out that if you do that, if you take your attention off of yourself and put all of your attention on the other person, you will be hysterically funny. Or at least it'll be fascinating to watch. Because it will be honest. It will be you truly reacting, and true reaction is the mark of great acting. You'll be truly reacting to this other person. So the trick to great improv is to not worry about yourself, how clever or funny or smart or dramatic you are, to leave all of that aside and instead focus on the other person. This may seem like it's backwards. It may seem like, oh, but I'm naturally dramatic. I should use that on stage. Don't worry. It will come through. But the trick is to really focus on the other person. Every great improviser is going to tell you this. One of the tricks that we employ when we talk about focusing on your partner is this idea of saying yes. In an improvisation, you get up there and very often the other person will say something completely outrageous. It's the first thing that pops into their head. Like, oh, this banana is on fire. Now, the impulse many of us have, if we haven't done much improv, is to say, what? What banana? Or, no, are you crazy? Bananas can't be on fire. And that is saying no. And when you do that, the scene comes to a complete halt. It hits a brick wall. It makes that awful noise. Just because it may be true that bananas can't be on fire, you saying no stops the improvisation. It's very a common occurrence for us because it's a lot easier to say no, but it stops the improv. And it takes the focus away from your partner and puts it on you because you just stopped it and it's no longer funny. Instead, the trick is to say yes, no matter what ridiculous idea they've given you. So if they say, the banana's on fire, you say, get the fiery banana away from me, it's terrifying. Now the apples are on fire. It's ridiculous, of course, but improvisation is ridiculous. Embrace that. It doesn't have to make sense. We make sense enough in math class. This is about being a little crazier. And saying yes is going to keep that crazy going and make it funny. Not only can you say yes, you can also say yes and there's this other thing. You can build on what they give you. Like I just did. Yes, the banana is on fire, and now the apples are on fire. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to, because the energy is now building. These two words, saying yes and, are the fuel that keep improvisation going, because it always is affirming your partner and then building on what they give you. And if they then say yes and build on that, then the scene goes, and the scene never comes to a halt like it does when you say no. Now, by saying yes and, I don't always mean literally saying those words, yes and. I mean the concept of always agreeing with what the other person is giving you, never shutting them down, and then building on that. So agreeing or accepting, perhaps, and then building on top of it. And the way that we can distill those ideas is this idea of saying yes and. So as we start doing improvisation this week, we'll have a chance to get up there, but don't worry if you are one of the sort of shy and quiet people in this world. That's great. Oftentimes you make the best improvisers because you do not have to fight against that tendency that some of us have to try and be clever or dramatic or funny. Because again, trying to be these things is actually going to be what is going to kill the humor in a piece. It seems very sort of backwards, but it turns out that these things are death to comedy. And that the real key is this, focusing on your partner,